the crimson drift, the whispering paddy fields. In the sultry haze of Thailand's monsoon season, the village of Ban Klong in Samut Songkhram province lay cloaked in an uneasy stillness. The year was 2025, but the air carried the weight of older, darker times. The rice paddies stretched endlessly under a bruised sky, their emerald blades swaying in a breeze that seemed to hum with secrets. It was here, in the quiet heart of the province, that the whispers began, whispers of Krasue, the cursed spirit whose glowing head and trailing entrails haunted the night. Suwan, a wiry farmer in his late 40s, had heard the stories since childhood. His grandmother spoke of Krasue as a woman damned by forbidden magic, her head severed from her body yet bound to it by a curse that kept her drifting through the dark, hungering for flesh. As a boy, Suwan had laughed off the tales, dismissing them as superstition to scare children into staying indoors after dusk. But now, as he stood at the edge of his field, staring at the mangled remains of a chicken, its entrails missing, its feathers scorched as if kissed by fire, he felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. The village had been on edge for weeks. At first it was just rumors, a stray dog found gutted near the canal, a farmer's prized rooster vanishing without a trace. Then came the sightings. Old Auntie Noy swore she'd seen a glowing orb floating over the paddies, trailing a glistening rope of intestines that pulsed with an unnatural crimson light. The local drunk Chai claimed it had hovered above his shack, whispering his name, in a voice that sounded like his long-dead wife. The authorities dismissed it all as hysteria, but their nighttime patrols, armed with flashlights and skeptical frowns, did little to quell the growing dread. Suwan's daughter, Molly, was the first to notice something truly wrong. At 16, she was sharpened and fearless, with a curiosity that often led her to the edges of the village, where the shadows grew thick. One night, as she returned from fetching water, she stopped dead in her tracks. "Papa," she whispered, her voice trembling as she pointed toward the canal. "It's watching us." Suwan followed her gaze but saw nothing, only the dark ripple of water and the faint glow of fireflies. Yet Molly's face was pale, her eyes wide with a fear he'd never seen in her before. "It had eyes," she said later, curled up by the fire in their small wooden house. "Red eyes, like embers, and it smiled." The curses echo. The stories of Krasue were not new to Ban Klong, but this was different. In the past, the spirit had been a fleeting terror, a shadow that vanished with the dawn. Now, it lingered. The villagers began to notice patterns. The attacks came in threes, always near water, always under a waning moon. The victims weren't just animals anymore. A fisherman named Samsak had gone missing 2 nights ago, his boat found drifting with bloodstains smeared across the bow. The police called it a crocodile attack, but the villagers knew better. Crocodiles didn't leave behind scorch marks or the faint acrid scent of sulfur. Suwan, single quotes Arsewife Lamai, insisted they visit the local monk, Pra Samchai, for protection. The old monk, his saffron robes faded from years of wear, listened to their fears with a grave expression. "Krasue is no ordinary spirit," he warned, his voice low and rasping. "She is born of betrayal and blood. Someone in this village or near it has invoked her. This is no accident." Pra Samchai performed a blessing, tying white threads around their wrists and chanting sutras to ward off evil. But as Su, his amulet, a small bronze pendant etched with sacred runes, he couldn't ancient script. He pressed it into Suwan's palm, his grip surprisingly strong. "Keep this close, do not wander at night, and whatever you do, do not look into her eyes." Suwan and Lamai returned home, the amulet heavy in Suwan's pocket. Molly was waiting, her face still pale, her fingers nervously twisting the hem of her shirt. She hadn't spoken much since that night by the canal, but her silence was louder than words. Suwan noticed how she avoided the windows after dark, how she flinched at every rustle of leaves outside. He wanted to comfort her, to tell her it was just a story, but the memory of the mangled chicken and the blood on Samsak's boat kept his reassurances locked in his throat. That night, the air was thick with the scent of rain and something else, something metallic, like blood, left too long in the sun. Suwan couldn't sleep. He sat on the porch, clutching the amulet, listening to the chorus of frogs and crickets that seemed to falter, as if the night itself held its breath. Then he heard it, a low, keening wail, faint but unmistakable, drifting from the direction of the canal. It wasn't human, nor was it animal, it was something else. something that clawed at the edges of his sanity. He stood, his heart pounding, and scanned the darkness. There, just beyond the rice paddies, a faint crimson glow bobbed gently above the ground, like a lantern carried by an unseen hand. It moved slowly, almost languidly, trailing a shimmering thread that pulsed with an eerie light. Suwan's breath caught as he saw it, a woman's head, her skin pale as moonlight, her hair matted with blood, her eyes burning red. Below her severed neck, a tangle of glistening entrails dangled, writhing like living things, their tips brushing the earth. The sight was wrong, unnatural, and yet there was a grotesque beauty to it, a maelstrom of horror and fascination that rooted him to the spot. The Krasue's lips parted, revealing jagged, blackened teeth, and she smiled. The expression was not kind, it was a predator's grin, hungry and knowing. Suwan's hand tightened around the amulet, the runes digging into his palm, but he couldn't tear his eyes away. Her gaze locked onto his, and for a moment he felt her voice inside his mind, soft and sibilant, like silk dragged over broken glass. "Suwan," it whispered, "you cannot run." He stumbled back, tripping over the porch step, and the glow vanished as quickly as it had appeared. The night resumed its chorus, but the air felt heavier now, as if the darkness itself had grown teeth. The blood packed. By morning, the village was buzzing with new rumors. Another body had been found this time, a young woman named Ploy, barely 20, who sold mangoes at the market. Her remains were discovered in a ditch near the river, her abdomen torn open, her organs missing. The ground around her was scorched in a perfect circle, and the air carried that same sulphurous stench. The police cordoned off the area. There, faces grim, but the villagers whispered what they dared not say aloud. Krasue had fed Suwan, gathered with the others at the temple, where Pra Samchai stood before a crowd of frightened faces. "This is no ordinary Krasue," he said, his voice steady but heavy with dread. "She is stronger than the stories suggest. Someone has awakened her, fed her with blood and intent. We must find the source of this curse before it claims more." The villagers exchanged uneasy glances. Superstition ran deep in Banklong, but so did secrecy. No one spoke of the old rituals, the ones whispered about in the shadows, rites performed by those desperate for power, wealth, or revenge. Suwan's grandmother had hinted at such things, warning of pacts made with spirits that demanded a price too steep to pay. He wondered now if someone had been foolish enough to summon the Krasue to offer blood in exchange for her favor. Molly, who had insisted on coming to the temple, tugged at Suwan's sleeve. "Papa, I saw something else that night," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "There was a mark on the ground near the canal, a circle with symbols, like the ones on your amulet, but wrong." Twisted Suwan's blood ran cold. He knew of such circles, wards meant to bind or summon spirits. If Molly was right, someone had performed a ritual, and they had done it poorly, or worse, deliberately. He took her hand and led her home, vowing to keep her close, but the image of the Krasue's burning eyes haunted him, and he knew that no walls or doors could keep her out if she chose to come. That evening, Suwan sought out Kem, the village's unofficial historian, a wiry old man with a penchant for collecting stories others preferred to forget. Kem lived on the outskirts of Ban Klong, in a shack cluttered with faded photographs and yellowed books. He listened to Suwan's account, his eyes narrowing as he lit a cigarette, the smoke curling like a spirit in the dim light. "There's an old tale," Kem began, his voice low, "about a woman named Nuri, a healer who lived here a century ago. She was beautiful, but her beauty was her curse. Men coveted her, and women envied her. When she refused a powerful merchant's advances, he accused her of witchcraft. The village turned on her, and he paused, exhaling a plume of smoke. They burned her alive by the canal. But Nari had learned forbidden arts, and as the flames consumed her, she cursed this place. Her head, they say, rose from the ashes, trailing her innards, and swore to feast on those who betrayed her." Suwan's mouth went dry. "You think this is Nari?" Kem shrugged. "Names change, but curses endure. Someone has stirred her anger, or perhaps her hunger. The question is who and why." The hunger grows, the attacks grew bolder. A week later, 3 more villagers vanished, their homes left eerily untouched, save for scorch marks on the floors and walls. The canal became a place of dread, its waters reflecting the moon like a mirror. For the damned, Suwan noticed the village changing doors bolted shut at dusk. children forbidden from playing outside, and offerings of rice and incense left at every crossroads to appease whatever stalked them. Molly, however, grew restless. Her fear had hardened into something else, defiance perhaps, or a need to understand. One night, against Suwan's orders, she slipped out with a flashlight and a kitchen knife, determined to find the circle she'd seen by the canal. Suwan woke to find her gone, his heart seizing with panic. He grabbed the amulet and a machete, and ran into the night, calling her name. The paddies were silent, the air thick with the threat of rain. Suwan's flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing nothing but mud and reeds until he saw it. A circle, just as Molly had described, etched into the earth with stones and ash. The symbols were indeed like those on his amulet, but distorted, as if drawn by a trembling hand. At the center lay a small pile of bones, still wet with blood, and a single perfect mango, its skin unblemished. "Molly!" Suwan shouted, his voice swallowed by the night. The crimson glow appeared, then, sudden and blinding, rising from the canal like a lantern lifted from the depths. The Krasue's head turned toward him, her eyes locking onto his with a hunger that felt personal, intimate. Her entrails writhed, their tips curling toward him like fingers beckoning him closer. The amulet burned in his hand, its runes glowing faintly, and the Krasue hissed, her voice a cacophony of rage and pain. "Suwan," she whispered, her voice now clear, dripping with venom. "You cannot protect her." He ran, his machete useless, his heart pounding with the certainty that Molly was in danger. He found her near the village, slumped against a tree, her flashlight shattered at her feet. Her eyes were open, staring blankly, and her hands were stained with blood not her own, but something else's. "Papa," she whispered, her voice hollow. "She showed me everything. The price of blood." Molly's story came in fragments, each one more chilling than the last. She had found the circle and seen the Krasue feed not on animals, but on memories, on guilt, on the secrets the village buried. The spirit wasn't just a predator. She was a judge, drawn to those who carried betrayal in their hearts. Molly claimed the Krasue had spoken to her, shown her visions of Nari's death, of the merchant's greed, of the village's complicity. But there was more. The circle wasn't old. It was fresh, carved within the past month, and Molly recognized the handwriting in the dirt. It belonged to Chai, the drunk who claimed that Krasue had called his name. Suwan confronted him at his shack, finding him surrounded by empty bottles and crude talismans. Chai confessed, his words slurred but laced with fear. He'd found an old book in the market, a grimoire of sorts, and thought he could summon the Krasue to punish his enemies, those who mocked him, who shunned him. He'd offered blood, first from animals, then from himself, but the ritual had gone wrong. The Krasue wasn't his servant, she was his master, and she was ravenous. Su dragged Chai to the temple, where Chai listened with a face like stone. The only way to stop her, the monk said, is to break the pact. Chai must face her, offer his blood willingly, and beg her forgiveness. If he fails, she will take us all. The final offering. The village prepared for the ritual under a waning moon, the air thick with fear and the stench of sulfur. Chai, trembling and sober for the first time in years, stood at the canal's edge, the circle redrawn with Chai's guidance. The villagers watched from a distance, clutching amulets and whispering prayers. Suwan held Molly close, her hand cold in his heart, still haunted by what she'd seen. As the moon dipped low, the crimson glow returned, brighter, fiercer. The Krasue emerged, her head a beacon of wrath, her entrails coiling like serpents. Chai fell to his knees, offering his blood with a trembling hand, his voice breaking as he begged for mercy. The Krasue hovered closer, her eyes burning into his, and for a moment, the night was silent. Then she lunged, her teeth tore into Chai's flesh, and her entrails wrapped around him, pulling him into the canal. The water churned red, then black, and the glow faded. The villagers waited, breathless, but the Krasue did not return. The lingering shadow weeks passed, and the attacks ceased. The village buried Chai's remains, what little they found, and the canal grew quiet. But Suwan noticed the changes. In Molly, she spoke less, smiled rarely, and sometimes, in the dead of night, he caught her staring at the canal, her eyes reflecting a faint crimson glow. The Krasue was gone, but her curse lingered, woven into the village's bones. Suwan kept the amulet close, its runes a reminder of the price of betrayal. And though the paddies swayed green and the moon waxed full, He knew the darkness was never truly gone.